Hello, my name is Suzanne Johnson. I'm a clinical social worker in Clinton Township, Michigan. However, this video is kind of separate from my practice. The title of the video is Sugar Dash Pleasure or Poison. And in my opinion, it's both. Obviously, it's pleasurable to eat for most people, but in the long run, I think it's a poison. Now, in the early 20s, if someone had told me that sugar was a poison, I would think they were being pretty fanatical. It was just so common. I know it wasn't the best food in the world, but it was just, I thought, pretty harmless. But I do remember when I was in undergrad, I had a cold and I was sitting next to a woman in my psychology class, and she told me that she and her family had decided to go off all sugar for 6 months. And she said they didn't have any colds during that time. And I thought that was really admirable of them, but I would never, ever think of doing that, even if it meant I didn't get a cold. So then, unfortunately, not long after that, I developed a full-blown food addiction, which included overconsumption of sugar. And it took me quite a while to figure out that my headaches and lethargy and feeling bad in general was really related to this, and finally seek enough help to stop eating sugar and processed foods. So I feel like I had 15 years of my life almost totally wasted because I didn't really grow very much during that time. And I suffered a lot. So I thought maybe if I could make this video, it could help someone not have to go through what I did. So the idea of it being a poison is related to it being gradually increased in our bodies, such as, so if you say for breakfast, you have some breakfast cereal that has sugar in it. For lunch, you have a soda pop or maybe in your salad dressing or in canned soup. For supper, you might have ice cream. For dessert, maybe you have a snack. Let's say you have sugar 3 times a day, every day for a year. Well, then that's 1,000 times. If you do it for 10 years, it's 10,000 times. There's a saying called the dose makes the poison. It's credited to Paracelsus, who expresses the classic toxicology maxim, quote, "All things are poison and nothing is without poison. The dosage alone makes it so a thing is not a poison." But in this case, the dosage can make it into a poison. So then about 7 years ago, I watched a YouTube video with Dr. Lustig, and it's called Sugar, the Bitter Truth. And it was so validating. I thought, so this is what's been happening all this time. Sugar really is very harmful for the body. And I fully recommend it. It's on YouTube. He posted it in 2009. It's got over 20 million views. It's 90 minutes. It goes into the politics, the chemistry. I'll be quoting from some of it during this video. But it's excellent. So he did say, he's a professor of pediatrics in the division of endocrinology at the University of California. And he said, quote, "Fructose is a chronic toxin. The liver does not get sick after 1 meal of fructose. It gets sick after 1,000 meals of fructose. But that is how many meals people eat," end of quote. And probably plenty more than that. He states that an average of 30% of fructose ends up as fat in the body. Now, in the 1700s, Americans' typical intake of sugar was 1 teaspoon a day. Compare it to now, its typical intake is 22 teaspoons a day. Casey Means, she's a functional medicine doctor who trained at Stanford University, states, quote, "The average American now eats 100 times more sugar than we ate 100 years ago," end of quote. More back to Dr. Lustig. He tells how in the 1970s, the food industry learned to process sugar into highly fructose corn syrup, which is 20% cheaper, 20% sweeter, but it's also cheaper for them to make and much more addictive. So that way people want to eat it more. And it really increases their business. He explains the biochemistry of why sugar is harmful in very clear scientific words. This new kind of sugar, used mostly in soda pops and processed foods. Dr. Mercola states that highly fructose corn chip is more metabolically risky than sucrose due to its chemical form. He writes, quote, "The fructose and the glucose are not bound together in highly fructose corn chip, so your body doesn't have to break it down. Therefore, the fructose is absorbed immediately, going straight to your liver. Too much fructose creates a metabolic disaster in your body," end of quote. Dr. Lustig states that 80% of this kind of sugar has to be metabolized in the liver. And I mean, the liver is already overloaded. We've got so many toxins in the air and the food and the water. So it's really hard on the liver. Processed sugar fools your metabolism by turning off your body's appetite control system. This kind of fructose does not stimulate insulin, which in turn does not suppress ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone, and stimulates leptin, or it doesn't stimulate leptin, which is the satiety hormone, which makes you feel full. So people don't feel full, and it's easy just to keep eating. And they often develop insulin resistance. Dr. David Rubin, the author of Everything You Wanted to Know About Nutrition, writes, quote, "White refined sugar is not a food. It's a pure chemical extracted from plant sources, purer in fact than cocaine, which it resembles in many ways. Its true name is sucrose, and its chemical formula is C12H22O11, has 12 carbon atoms, 22 hydrogen atoms, 11 oxygen atoms, and absolutely nothing else to offer," end of quote. The chemical formula for cocaine is C17H21NO4, which is basically the same as sucrose, except it has a nitrogen instead of oxygen. So this information relates to a University of Berkeley YouTube video I saw that said that rats in a study addicted to cocaine chose sugar before they chose cocaine. The fructose in processed foods increases uric acid, which can increase your blood pressure and potentially damage your kidneys. Too much uric acid over time increases low-level inflammation, which affects health in many ways. For instance, when blood vessels have too much inflammation, this can lead to heart attacks and strokes. Dr. Joseph McCullough writes that there's a good deal of evidence that some cancers are caused by chronic inflammation. Dr. Mark Hyman writes, quote, "The inflammation triggered by sugar leaves in its wake a sea of diseases beyond the brain: heart disease, obesity, cancer, diabetes, and rapid aging. This evidence is overwhelming and irrefutable," end of quote. Dr. McCullough also writes, "Fructose rapidly leads to weight gain and abdominal obesity, such as the beer belly, decreased HDL, increased LDL, elevated triglycerides, elevated blood sugar, and high blood pressure. In other words, the classic metabolic syndrome." Dr. Lustig states, quote, "Chronic fructose exposure over years of consuming create 8 of the same major health problems that alcohol abuse does." And he lists these as the following: hypertension, myocardial infarction, dyslipidemia, pancreatitis, obesity, hepatic dysfunction, fetal insulin resistance, habitation, if not addiction. He states that fructose is alcohol, quote, "without the buzz," end of quote. Lustig believes that metabolic syndrome, largely caused by too much processed sugar consumption, could be using 70% of our health dollars in the United States. Processed sugar is usually made from sugar cane or sugar beets. Through chemical processing of these natural foods, whole foods, 64 food elements are destroyed. The minerals and vitamins are destroyed. Proteins, fats, and enzymes are removed. At the end of the process, the sugar is bleached snow white, usually with the use of pork or cattle bones. Dr. Lustig reports 80% of the foods in the grocery stores are laced with processed sugar. Processed sugar harms the nervous system, which affects emotional and physical health. When people eat processed sugar, the bacteria in the intestines that manufacture B vitamins complexes begin to die. And as these die, glutamic acid is not processed. This leads to decrease in short-term memory and brain functioning. The B vitamins are needed for healthy myelin sheath that's protective covering for our nerves. Once I convinced one of my clients, she had a lot of pain in her body from fibromyalgia, to stop eating all foods with sugar in them. She told me that before she did that, she had migraine headaches that lasted a full day 5 times a month. And after she stopped eating sugar, she said she only had migraine headaches 1 to 2 times a year. But it took about 3 months before the migraines started to reduce so much. She said many of her food cravings disappeared also. Sugar intake can be related to mental problems. Brains are very sensitive. As sugar consumption decreases vitamin D, insulin production decreases. This causes high glucose levels in the bloodstream, which leads to a confused mental state or negative moods. Dr. Alexander B. Schoss wrote in Diet, Crime, and Delinquency that many people in the psychiatric inpatient ward in prison are sugaraholics. He observed erratic emotional outbreaks often followed a sugar binge for people he observed in these settings. I go into more detail into this into my video called Neurofunctional Harmfulness of Overeating. When refined sugar is eaten, the body has to use vital nutrients such as calcium, sodium, potassium, and magnesium from other parts of the body to process the sugar. Many times, so much calcium is needed to neutralize the effects of sugar that people can develop osteoporosis and more tooth decay. Some chiropractors believe that the lack of minerals and nutrients from eating so much sugar may be related to increase in back problems due to weak bone structure. There's a documentary called The Secrets of Sugar that examines sugar addiction. It explains how Dr. Suzanne D. Lamonte from Brown University did research where she fed healthy rats the equivalent of the North American diet with the same sugars and kinds of fat that Americans eat typically. All of her rats developed dementia. She said sugar resistance can occur in any organ. She believes that Alzheimer's is insulin resistance in the brain. The Secrets of Sugar also tells about the University of California study run by Dr. Kimber Stanhope, where she had college students that were fed fructose sugar in drinks, soda pop, for 2 weeks to test for risk markers. Every time she ran this test, the results were the same. The risk markers for cardiovascular disease increased. Other kinds of sugar did not get the same results. She said if she was testing a new food additive and she got the same results as she got from fructose sugar, she's sure it would be pulled off the market. In Dr. Mark Hyman's book, The Ultra Mind Solution, he quotes, "The most powerful tool you have to change your brain and your health is your food. Food contains information that talks to your genes, turning them on and off and affecting their function moment to moment. Food is the fastest acting and most powerful medicine you can take to change your life." End of quote. And that's the end of this video. I hope you find it helpful. Have a good day.